Welcome to Suddenly Different, where we explore stories and strategies for life when it doesn't go to plan. I'm Leigh-Anne Charland, inviting you to join me on this journey. What do you do when your child's rage explodes so fast you find your own hands at their throat and you realize you just crossed a line you never imagined? For Tracey Walker, that was the moment everything stopped. It was the moment she understood that something had to change, not just for her son, but for her. Today, Tracey is the founder of the Calm Principle. She helps people step out of unconscious patterns they've inherited, the ones that keep them reacting instead of choosing. Whether she's working with parents of neurodiverse children, guiding women through retreats, or helping people unhook from limiting beliefs, Tracey shows us that calm isn't about a perfect life. It's about building the skills to meet life on our own terms. Tracey, it's fabulous that you're here today. I hope that we have a wonderful time, and I'm certain that we will. So I'd love to start right at the heart of it, the moment that changed everything for you. What happened at that moment when your child was having a meltdown? And how did it shift the course of your life?
I'd have to say it was an absolute shock to have been pushed to that limit. It was, I suppose, a real wake-up call, because I suppose part of my background and seeing the violence as a child, I never thought I would get to that point, but it did push me to that point, and it was scary. It was so scary, and I pulled myself up because I saw the look in both our eyes, and it shocked me. And the next thing I did is I actually picked up the phone and I rang my doctor, because it was in that instant the where it could have gone was really frightening for me. So something had to change. Something definitely had to change.
I understand. I know it's hard. It's hard raising children. They do. I think that they know exactly how to push our buttons. But like you, Tracey, when we've been brought up in a household where dysfunction exists, and unfortunately, the default behavior that we learn is survival, and sometimes that is at the surrender is not the right word. I'm sorry, my brain's not quite so quick this morning, but it's that we've done it before we get to choose.
It was an automatic response. I don't know at that moment where it came from, and that's what I had to start to explore. Where did this come from?
Right.
I had started my own journey of understanding my background, but here I was dealing with a boy who had these moments, not all the time, but when he lost it, and I mean completely lost it, it was really hard to deal with. It's like, what was the trigger? I don't know. It wasn't at times outside himself. It happened inside. So when I went to the doctor, I said, you've got to find something wrong with this boy, because if you don't, he's either going to kill me or I'm going to kill him. That was the turning point of going, we have to look at all this. And I was lucky. I was so lucky to have a doctor who actually heard me, who actually listened without going, this, and this. She actually listened, and her response to it was, well, we can do all the things that you've already done in exploring what was going on, like going to the school and talking to the guidance officer and talking to all these other professional people. And they gave me theories, and the guidance officer said, it's only because when he did a personality test, we're locking horns because we're on different sides of the personality spectrum. And that wasn't helpful. It was putting the blame and on both of us. And I just felt there's got to be more. So when I reached out to the doctor, she just said, well, we can do all of this or we can go straight to the top. And I said, I'm going to go straight to the top. And that was to a top psychiatrist in Brisbane. And when we did that, I had to do surveys and questionnaires, and so did my son, and had to go through all the medical, stuff. And what they actually came up with was that he was below the lowest line there was on the scale for ADHD. And this was back in the 80s. And I go, yeah, great. We've at least given it a name. But the only thing that
Yes.
they wanted to do was to give him medications. And because I'd done a lot of research myself, I wasn't the expert. They were the experts. So as a mum, seeing my son do these things, it was like, well, okay, I've got to follow that path. And for a time I did. But as a parent, something just niggled at me to say, there's got to be more. There's got to be more than a tablet. So I started doing my own research, and I reached out to different people, got information from a research scientist in America, started to find documentation, articles, books, all of those sorts of things to understand what was actually happening to him. And when I started to understand what was happening in the brain, because there was one time where the look on his face was so sincere. And I said, I asked you to do this, this, and this. And he said to me, but Mum, you didn't. And the sincerity in his voice and on his face. So what I understood was he got a portion of the information that I, to say, well, you need to make your bed and do this and get dressed and blah, blah, blah. He got the first bit, but he didn't get the rest of it. So I had to then change the way I approached giving him information. And it was just a process of trial and error back then. It was really interesting how going through the motions of the things that worked, the things that didn't work. And I suppose that's where what I call the calm principle now, a lot of these strategies that I use. So yeah, it was a lot of trial and error.
Well, I congratulate you on your determination to be an active member of this solution team, right? Your son was part of the team, your doctors were part of the team, the researchers, everybody was part of an unconscious team, but they were all working towards helping children or people with ADHD, which is such a misunderstood condition. And I understand, that there are varying levels of it. So I thank you so much for sharing your raw defining moment. When you look back, did it reveal in looking at this research and having these conversations, were you able to objectively look at your own patterns, even though, you didn't have the condition, but knowing that it could trigger? So just in the same way that you couldn't give your son a whole list of instructions and expect him to know them all, which is quite normal, right? How many times do you remember the fourth or fifth thing that is said to you, let alone most of us switch off after one? So you've said that something really stuck with you, and you can't choose if you're unconscious. So how did that realization change the way you showed up as a parent and as a person?
I had done a lot of work on myself, breaking the cycle that I was born into and the relationships that I fell into, which was aligned with my upbringing. So doing that work, creating that awareness and understanding that I fell into dysfunctional relationships, violent, alcoholic relationships, it was a conscious awareness. And what I realized is I could not change my son, as I couldn't change the alcoholic and those people that were in my life at different times. Where it had to come from was within me. So creating that conscious awareness, realizing that I had to change. So I had to have that conversation with my son and help him understand, because he was being suspended, he was being in timeout, he was getting into really difficult situations, even from grade 1, where his brain said to him, there's my bag, but there's somebody in them between me and my bag, so I'll just pick them up and I'll throw them. So he gets suspended. That's how his brain worked. By having him, I suppose, partly on the medication, which calmed his nervous system, for me to then start implementing the conscious awareness activities. But it had to come from him. If he wasn't willing to work with me, there would be not a lot that I could do. But because he was willing and open to trialing all of these different strategies that I used, even to a point of even homework, it would take hours to just get through homework. And I did it with a little timing clock, kitchen time clock. And for every subject, we'd just keep it to 10 minutes, because his mind would just be like, I saw a butterfly out the window, and off he'd go. And it would be, okay, we need to bring him back. So he could concentrate for 10 minutes and that was fine. So it was a matter of taking the skills that I implemented into my life to not react to the alcoholic. And eventually the alcoholic basically moved on and found somebody that would play those games, because I just stopped. So what I had to do with my son is to recognize internally inside himself where that invisible line was, and that if he crossed it, there would be a consequence. And I didn't have any control over that consequence, because it usually was the school that dished it out. So working with him with all of these strategies over time got him to a place where the school was open to implementing some of these strategies within the school if there was an incident. And one of those things was we would bring in every person that was involved in that incident, and we would have a roundtable discussion, but uninterrupted. It would be the fact that the teacher would explain the bigger picture, the scenarios of what could have happened, how it was, impacting other people's learning, her teaching, all of those sorts of things, how it impacted me, how it impacted the school. And he got the chance to share what his thoughts were, uninterrupted. That was really, really important, that he had a voice, which over time helped the whole school community start to understand he's not just a kid with a label called ADHD. He was a human being, and there were outside influences that were provoking him. And as a teacher myself, I knew all of these things. And I had students that would say, I do that because I'm ADHD, so you've just got to let me do it. And I was lucky as a parent with a son who was severely ADHD. I would just say, well, you're talking to the wrong person, because my son was diagnosed as having severe ADHD, below the lowest line on the scale. So he doesn't get away with it, and neither will you. And that was enough for these kids to go, I can't manipulate her. And so I didn't have a lot of behavior issues in my classes, because I didn't step into that, he's ADHD, we have to allow and let him be. So the school implemented strategies, I implemented strategies, and my son knew the consequence if he crossed that line. So we came up with a system, and that was like the red card that they use today in schools. But it was on the condition that he only used it when he felt like he was going to cross that invisible line and he could get out of class. The school implemented a seat up near the principal's office, but even the principal had to be taught to not even say hello. Because when he goes into these moments. I call it, he goes to Pluto and I can't get him back. And talking to him just pushed him further and further out there. So example would be, we were camping. I stayed in camp while everybody else went hiking, and he had one of those moments. And this dad used to always say to me, "Oh, Tracey, he's just like all other boys," until this day. And when they got back to camp, he was so angry and went inside himself that he sat out in a storm in the rain for hours. And the more people that kept saying, come in, get dried, have dinner. And I would just say, leave him be. Just let him be. He will come back when he's ready. So the more I went through these processes to teach him how to do things in a different way, he eventually learned that for himself. And I really didn't have to do too much after that. The school ended up saying, well, we have to take him out of that pool of ADHD students because he doesn't fit. And it went even further where the psychiatrist said to me, you know, Tracey, will you come and speak to all of my clients' parents, because whatever it is that you do is working. Well, I didn't have the confidence back in the 80s to do what I do today in speaking and taking this out into the world. But yeah, even he could see a change.
So in looking at that, it seems to me as though in exploring the different strategies that you developed with your son and the school, that you were able to break the mold of a typical ADHD diagnosis and empower your son to be able to self-regulate and to start healing himself in a way.
We all have that power.
And
we all have that.
Yeah. But little children don't necessarily know that, especially when there is a system of diagnosis, a supply of medication, and a fear of being different, or a determination to be different, that as children are growing up. And I suppose there is that danger in the system of when people are defined by a label. Would that be fair?
I do work with other children, and I have a young man whose mum reached out in desperation, and he was starting high school and spent most of his first term in high school in suspension. And in 2 sessions, we gave him back his power, and he started to take back his control. The bullies left him alone. The staff couldn't understand what they saw. It just didn't compute that what happened to this boy to have such a transformation. And even his English teacher actually rang Mum and said, I'm so proud of him. I can't believe he's so in control now. And it was just through giving him a lot of these processes that I've evolved over 30 years to create in 2 sessions. This young man now took back his power for his own education, for his own life, that he can now take those skills into his adult life, into relationships, all of those things, workplaces, that he now has control of because he has techniques. And
that is amazing.
But to give the power back to the person is so empowering. And that's, I suppose, what I did for myself in my own life when I empowered myself, that the alcoholic walked away to find somebody that would play those manipulative games. That's what's the point of giving the power back to the person, instead of believing a label. Yes, a label was good for me to go, aha, now we've got a name for it. But I wasn't going to allow that label of ADHD to put it out so the school community, students, other parents would say, oh, well, you know, that's that boy, he's got ADHD. That's why that is not the whole story. And I think that's what we need to start to create awareness for people to go, okay, yes, I've been diagnosed with this, but is that everything? Is there more to this that we can then start going inside and exploring what's truly going on for us and take back our power?
Yes. Yeah, because I like it is easy to use the word just and accept diagnosis and hand your power away as parents, as sufferers, as anybody within the community that we just rely on that label. But a label does not define anybody. It is vitally important that somebody within the cohort of people around somebody who's been diagnosed, somebody needs to stand up, which you do, and say there are choices. Let us look at what the choices are, because what are the dangers? If somebody is labelled with ADHD in primary school, what is like a worst case scenario that can happen if they don't look into how the child can have choice?
They fall through the cracks. If I didn't do what I did with my son, he would have been one of those students. And as a teacher, I've seen many of them where teachers and staff just give up. It's too hard. These kids aren't understanding what's going on inside themselves. So if you don't empower them with skills and tools to become aware, they're only going to go with what they know. It's the same as me as an adult. I only followed the path that I only knew, which was jumping from dysfunctional, violent, alcoholic relationships, because that's what I grew up with. That was my normal. And nobody opened my mind to something more. And that is, I suppose, the key to go. Yes, it was great to have a name for what was happening to my son. But as a parent, my biggest fear was if I didn't find an answer, my son would have ended up in prison for harming somebody. Like, that's how angry he got. Where one day he actually even picked up a brick to hit somebody with. Like, as a parent, that was terrifying. If I didn't explore every option, what would have happened? I believe he would have ended up in prison. So I had no choice but to explore all of these. And I'm grateful that I was born into a violent alcoholic environment, because if I hadn't have been, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn all the tools and the skills that I take to clients now. And that's what keeps me doing the work that I do in the world.
I know that some of the tough lessons that we've learnt as we're growing up, it is really good when we're able to say, actually, I can use this for good, right? I know that I grew up in a violent, rage-filled household too, and binge drinking. So I learned how to adapt to the emotion and the charge in the space. Very good at hiding.
Yes. Whereas now for me,
And
yes, I could push that down, I could hide, do all of those things, but now I don't hide. I have got the tools to confront it and go, I respect me today. I am deserving to be treated with respect, not disrespect. And when I was living in a violent alcoholic relationship, I didn't know what respect is because I didn't see it in my family. Whereas I got to a point where I had grown enough to go, this is not acceptable. But I learned to do it in a different way. In the early days, it would be rage like my mother did. But once I learned a different path and could see, I changed it. I changed it to something really, really calm. Not blame, not accusations, just calm resilience to go, what is it that I want? And even to a point as little things of taking pride in the way I dressed. And I remember the alcoholics' families thought I was weird or I had joined a cult or something because I started to respect myself. And that's, I suppose, when people find that challenging because it's out of the normal for them. And that's, I suppose, I don't live in that world anymore. I keep evolving and changing and always wanting to learn more because they're the things that I bring to the people that choose to work with me. I never stop. Because there's so much more within me that comes to the surface for me now to go, aha, now I'm consciously aware of that. So I do read my body as I taught my son, because as I said to my son, I don't know when that invisible line will appear, where that point of no return will happen. Only he could do that by recognizing the feelings and emotions that were happening in his body. And once he recognized that, that's when he could step away. And it's the same with me. I learned, okay, there is a time where I have to step away from certain people because their energy is not in alignment. And that's okay for my own health and well-being. And I think that's really important for people to start to become really consciously aware, not just dismiss it, not to push it down, not to go and know where that came from. Because the work that I do in the world, it's bizarre of what we think we know and what truly happened. And what truly happened was experienced by that little child. And that can be really a different perspective to what my adult self believes. It's an interesting world that I work in.
It is really interesting because we've got the stories that are the perceptions of what happened based on our memory and the distortion from our family as they tell us what they remember. And so it can be different. But when you go back to the feeling, to that emotion that is in the body, and you know that, that there's only a couple of millimeters between okay and not okay. I think anybody who has that awareness of emotions in their body has got so much power. And knowing, because we're made up of atoms and we're magnetic. So, we will react to other people's magnetism.
Mm-hmm.
And, which is why we can clash when we collide. But as part of the story, the chat we had before today, where you, like me, are a lifelong learner. And I absolutely love the fact that you currently are looking at different ways to be able to express yourself from stage and in different presentation mediums, as well as always looking for new ways to help people with their condition, that you are doing improv.
Yes. It's, as you said, I'm a lifetime learner. And I'm always exploring new ways to support the people that work with me in viewing things in a different way, because our brain is wired to what's comfortable. And to step outside that, I honour those people that choose to do that, because it's not easy. So I'm always putting myself in uncomfortable situations. And that's what improv has done for me recently to a course that I'm doing. And it's quite funny because as I step out of that session, my brain actually hurts because I'm actually rewiring and firing new neural pathways in my brain. And that's what I do when I work with somebody, is to try and see through a different lens, which is really important. And that's what improv does. It helps you really explore with freedom, without limitations of, I can't do this and I can't do that. And people come to me in the beginning and, oh, well, I can't do this because of that. I can't do this because of this. And their focus is definitely on their circumstances. Whereas if I'm showing people that I'm always continuing to step out of my comfort zone, they can too. And so that's why I'm always exploring more ways to go, okay, how can I integrate this into, my webinars or my retreats or the work that I do in the world as a speaker? How can I bring something like that to help people start to feel those emotions internally so that they can go, aha, I understand now, because we all stay on a merry-go-round and there is no exit off. I stayed on that merry-go-round year in, year out, thinking that's all there was. But I now know that there is so much more if we're willing to give ourselves that opportunity to step outside our comfort zone. And that's why improv for me at the moment is just another activity to explore what else is there that I can bring into the tools and the techniques that I use. And I will continue to do that. That's just the person I am.
Well, I think it's wonderful. I know that when I was probably 18 months into my recovery, I started an improv course. And at the beginning of the improv course, I couldn't do any of the activities. I couldn't remember the instruction. I did what I could. At that time, I wasn't able to stand unaided or anything. But by the end of probably my 6th class, I could see that there was one exercise that I could do the whole way through. And not with elegance and grace. However, I could do it. And that proved to me that I could rewire my brain. It was the first conscious proof. It was undeniable that it was possible to create a new pathway. And in creating new pathways, then I don't know, I think I had different side roads that could go a different route to other things. And so I keep going with the improv. Apart from the presentation part, it makes you so much more open to spontaneity.
Yes. Yeah. I've had a fascination with the brain, and I suppose that goes right back to when my first husband had a brain injury and was in hospital for 3 months before he died. And just sitting there watching other patients that would come in and how they changed, how they found different pathways in their brain. And all these years later, I'm still curious to how it works. And there's so much more to learn. And so taking that neuroplasticity into my webinars and my retreats is really important for people to understand that everything is possible. We just have to start to open our mind to it instead of dismissing it and going, oh, well, I can't do that. I didn't think I could do improv, but look at me. I'm having fun. I'm laughing. I come away from a session feeling really tired, but I know that I'm really challenging my brain to do something really different. And it's a lot of fun. Everything, not just improv.
It's fantastic.
Every day. One of the things I say to people is, I've just run a 4-week webinar, and I challenged the people that came to be aware of where do they park at the shopping centre. Is it the same place every time? And they go, oh yeah, didn't notice that. But now they're switched on to challenge themselves to park somewhere else, do something differently. And it's those little things that start to create that everyday awareness. And it just grows from there. And that's something that I love to see, that light bulb moment. You see it in their face to go, oh, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't see that before. But now they're consciously aware, and hopefully once I've opened that door, like me, they will just keep wanting to look for more. And that's the key.
So as you are trying to bring your concepts and your processes into the system, into the school system, the medical awareness system, what have you learned?
It's difficult because the systems have been on one path. And one of the experiences, what led me out of teaching, was an incident that happened at school, and it sent me down a path that was more devastating than anything that I'd experienced. And it was into work cover, and they forced me down to going down counselling psychology path. And at that time, I had previously, while I was teaching, training in coaching, in life skills. And I knew a different way, but they weren't, it was into that blame, it was my fault. It was everybody else's fault, instead of pausing and actually going, okay, let's look at the bigger picture, like I did with my son, where the principal, the admin, the teacher, whoever was involved, the other child, myself, would sit around and go, okay, let's all have a voice here. And that needs to happen more often, because what happened to me was I was forced down one path, which ended up causing me to have panic attacks and into PTSD. And that was really, really tough. I was at a shopping centre and I saw a student, not even in school uniform, just a teenager, and it caused me to go to have a panic attack. What happened was the fact that doing talk therapy just caused more trauma for me. Whereas I was open to alternate modalities, and I looked at EFT, emotional freedom technique, tapping, and I found somebody to go and have some sessions with, and I found that calmed my nervous system so much that when I went to them, I was moving forward because I was clearing it. Then they'd force me back to the talk therapy, which caused me more trauma, and to go back into that scenario, which was more traumatic for me. So I had this flip-flop, and I had to sort of stop myself and go, okay, this is my own mental health and my own well-being that I have to look after. Do I stay in the fear to get paid money and stay in this system possibly for years with this ongoing trauma? Or do I take control of my own mental health and stick with doing the EFT and get over this trauma faster? And what the system actually did was they forced me in front of a panel of 5 psychiatrists to prove to them why what they were doing was actually causing me more harm and what I was doing was actually helping me. And sadly, they weren't open to listening and hearing what I was saying. Their eventual termination was, well, obviously what you're doing is working for you. Whereas it was disheartening to go, well, maybe this is something we need to look at. And I was grateful that even like with my son, this psychiatrist could see that whatever I was doing was actually working for my son. Disappointing that I didn't have the confidence to do what I do today. But I would like to ask every employer or corporation is, do you give choice to your employees instead of pushing them down one path? Do you give them choice of, if they want to go counselling psychology, fine, but do they have other options? And I'm not saying EFT is the only option. There's hypnotherapy, there's other modalities. Do corporations actually have a health plan in place to give their employees choice? And I really believe that is really a really important conversation that we really need to have today for business owners and corporations.
Yes, I definitely think that with the amount of stress that is just being suppressed and pushed down in people's physiology, which will come up and come out later in their health, if the only way that they get assistance with that is talk fest, it's re-injuring. It's just not I don't think that it is the only way that we can do things.
And I have to agree.
So, yeah. So let's talk about the calm principle in action, right? So in understanding that parents out there whose children have just been diagnosed with ADHD have had it for quite a while, if they're listening to this and looking for an alternate way of thinking. So one of the things you teach is recognizing the invisible line. That point before shutdown and explosion. What is some early steps to help someone to be able to spot that in themselves?
I think it's more about getting clarity. So the calm principle is clarity, awareness, liberation, and momentum. Once we get clear, and where I find parents, teachers, they feel like they have the answer, and you can't have an answer for somebody else. It has to come from in here. This is where that awareness starts. Once we take a pause and start to look at, so one of the things with my son with his ADHD was to help him become more aware of what was actually happening for him, to start to recognize not just his reactions, but his emotions, what was happening inside, who was part of this reaction. And that's where then it's like, let's pause after he's calmed down. So I gave him that time to what I classed as, let's come back to earth. When he came back to earth, then we could sit and have a conversation, if he was open to it. Not for me to tell him. So one of the activities that I used to do many years ago was I would ask him to write down in his own words what actually transpired in that reaction, and get really, really specific in what actually happened. And that's part of being really honest. You know, I had to be really honest with myself when I speak about when I put my hands around his throat. That's how far I got pushed. That's my honesty. He had to be really specific and clear about what truly happened, and not be fearful of what he might put out there because of somebody else's reaction. Then the next step was to then go, okay, I honor you for being so honest. So having that support, not trying to fix it, not trying to put my spin on it, because it was his journey, it was his experience. So he had to start to explore, and then we'd flip it. What would be a better outcome? What would he be willing to do? And I used to do this in class with students that would get into trouble, and I had a process that I would take them through as well. And it was to create awareness. It was create that awareness of what they didn't see. So when you had a tick sheet and you could tick off, and most kids would go, wow, I was doing 8 things that I shouldn't have been doing in that class. They've now got clarity of what they were doing. That's really important. That's where that awareness starts to grow, and you help them then to become aware and say, okay, what would you like to work on? And you know yourself, when we take baby steps, like we can't fix all of these things at once, but working through this process, what you can do is then take one thing at a time. So what was he willing to do? I have no control over what the school would dish out as a punishment, but he had power of when he would be back in the classroom if he was willing to work with the school and work with strategies to bring him back in line with the structure that the school had in place, because I had no power in changing that. That was outside of myself and outside of him. But he had the power within him to take back his control. Now, the next one is liberation. That's our fears. So we all have fear. What he needed to do was to befriend that fear, to walk with it, to go, okay, instead of just jumping into going, oh, well, the school's going to blame me or this or that, or, okay, let's pull that back. Let's come back to pause and let's look at where these fears are coming from. And they're usually imprints. They're things that have happened previously that we make them into a belief and a habit. So once we become very, very clear and we become aware of these imprints that we all carry, then you can then start to step into the momentum of doing a shift, changing, seeing it in a different light, seeing it through a different lens, having a different perspective, that you can have better outcomes. And that's what my calm principle, helps people to see a totally different perspective instead of going down that comfort merry-go-round that we've been on for years, possibly all of our lives.
Yes. Yes, well, we do. We get stuck in those default behaviours and get caught in blame. And if we take our own responsibility, transformation can definitely occur. If we've got people around us who are supporting us and we have the courage to change.
And you need that support, I suppose.
And it sounds to me as though your retreats, that you give women the space to connect with themselves.
Yes, and that's really important.
Create a space that they can transform.
Yeah, the tools that I give the women to have time to go away and process for themselves. It's not for me to tell them they need to do this or they need to do that. It's for them to start to recognize and get really clear. And then we can start to look at possibilities of where their life can go. And it's amazing when women honor themselves enough to give them that space to come away, to do things in a different way, not to be so busy that we're going here and we're doing all of these activities. This is a retreat for people to pause for themselves, to really start to have a look without anybody else around telling them what they should or shouldn't be doing. What my retreats does is, I suppose, to open their mind to seeing something in a different light. And they just are amazed at what opens up. I've got people that want to come back a second time and do it again because what they've learnt the first time, and they now want to go deeper. And I just honor every single one of those people because something shifted inside themselves, not outside. Their circumstances are still the same, but something inside of them is the shift, and that's where their power lies. And then they go away and they put it into practice and they want to come back because they want to go deeper. And that's beautiful. That means what I'm doing and giving to women is going out into the world, because what they will do then is they will then pass it on to somebody else. And isn't that beautiful?
The ripple effect of personal transformation is extraordinary. You've said that sometimes you have to borrow someone else's courage until we find our own. What does that look like with the people that you work with?
Well, I suppose it goes back to my journey. I needed somebody to believe in me. So when I started this journey, my first big step was to take myself back and get my education, because I dropped out of school and didn't finish grade 9. So I went back as a widow, single mum, raising 3 children on my own, in class with the kids at a local high school as a mature age student, which was pretty scary. Now, if I had been trying to do that on my own, those old voices, those old fears would have well, they did. They rose up and they were telling me that I would fail. I'm not good enough. I couldn't see this through when I sat for that first exam at high school. But I had a support person. I had a mentor within an organisation, and I had a new voice that was also saying, you can do that. You can see this through. You've got what it takes. And that was my mentor. That was my new person trying to break free from all of these old patterns. So at my retreats, I suppose I'm that person for them to say, I trust and I believe in what's possible for you. And I suppose the more I step into this work, it's lovely to have people, say the space that I hold for women is powerful. It's so calming. And I'm grateful that I can give these women the space to reflect for their own journey without being their voice, but to be their support on their journey to self-discovery. And that's what it is. Discovering who you were always meant to be is so, so powerful. And I never knew who I could be until I stepped into this world. So I love doing what I do in the world. Yes.
Well, I love that you love doing what you do in the world, because I know when I'm in your presence, I feel like I am able to take a deep breath and to come down softly into my body. You have a calming way about you, and you have such a quiet strength that I know that all I need to do is look at you, and I know that between us, we've got this.
Definitely.
So for anyone out there who is thinking, she just described me, and they've thought that they can't change, but they really want to, in just even a little way, what is a first small step that you could recommend?
To recognize that fear and take the step anyway. Because once we do, when we step over that invisible line, it's not as scary. Not at all. It was a really hard step for me, and I'm sure it was for my son. But the benefits that he gained and what I gained, you just can't put a price on it. You just can't put a price. It's light up when I speak about what I do and the people that have worked with me. And when they walk with their fear and do it anyway, it's amazing. And I could say, oh, well, why didn't I get this, a lot longer, so much longer? I came to this when I was meant to. And I say to people, you're here because this is your time, that you're ready to open your mind to doing something differently. I don't look at what could have been or what should have been. This is your time. The day that you make a decision for yourself,
perfect timing
is the time.
Yes, it is. It is always perfect timing when these things are discovered and acted upon. So Tracey Walker's story reminds us that calm isn't about never feeling. It's about feeling fully without being run by the reaction. She's shown us that labels can limit and choice can liberate. That courage can be borrowed and awareness can be learned. And that transformation doesn't begin when life gets easier. It begins the moment we decide to meet life differently. If you'd like to explore more of Tracey's work, head to turningpointforyou.com.au and discover her retreats, webinars, and practical tools for emotional mastery. Until next time, honour your nervous system, question the boxes you've been put in, and remember, the smallest shift in awareness can change the whole story. Thank you so much, Tracey, for being with us today.
Thank you.
This has been Suddenly Different. I'm Leigh-Anne Charland, and I'm so grateful you shared your time with me. If you felt a spark, a tear, or a moment of recognition, I hope you'll pass that gift along by sharing this show. Take a deep breath, trust your path, and I'll meet you back here soon.